So here we are. It's the end of season 1 nearly. Before we go on any further, I want to just address the elephant in the room. The audio is way better all of a sudden.
It is way better, Joe. And
Wow.
it also is the end of season 1.
It is. So good news, and it's not bad news that it's the end of season 1 because we've got more exciting things to come. But here we are in the studio nearly, and we just want to wrap up season 1, don't we?
Yeah, we do. So let's get to it. We went through many different topics, Joe, in this first season of the ins and outs of work, bringing you both an insider and outsider perspective. And we think there's been something in it for everyone. From diversity, equity, and inclusion to the changing role of the manager to company culture.
Yes, and on to internal mobility, people analytics and data, HR's role as an organization transformer even.
Yeah, and we also touched on people experience, productivity, remote work, and work from anywhere. And frankly, Joe, so much more.
So much more. It's amazing just reading through those topics again because we've covered some distance. But don't you worry, listener, this is not a goodbye. This is not a sad outro to this podcast because we're not going away anywhere. But more on that in just a little moment. First, we wanted to conclude this first season with a look at just a few of the standouts from the 18 episodes of season 1. Where to start? Why don't you start us off, Neely? What stood out for you?
Sure. For me, well, obviously all of the episodes were awesome, Joe.
Awesome.
But one of my personal favorites definitely was the one with Dina Upton from Drift, talking about Drift going digital first forever in response to COVID.
We've hired 138 people virtually this year, and they're spread across different parts. I mean, we're now in London, we're in Australia. And so especially as you start to go global, with other organizations that I've been part of, it's hard to communicate, especially if corporate or headquarters is in a location that's a 5-hour time zone difference. And so the key decision was around equity. We did survey the company to ask, in October, we surveyed the organization and said, if you had a choice, what would you choose? A third, and we gave them, kind of 3 choices, sort of in office, totally remote, or hybrid. And they went a third. So the data didn't really give us anything. But I think the problem was people couldn't really visualize or understand what is this? What does it mean to be,
Right.
What does hybrid mean? I only know Drift as this in office, hyped up organization where I get my energy from being in the office.
Yes, that was episode 4. Secondly, one of my favorites was with Sender, episode 6, Saskia, really around culture and what acquisitions, especially company acquisitions, means for company culture.
The number one thing is really to bring the teams together as early as possible. With Everode, for example, we had a joint kickoff session where we really took an hour with both organizations to sort of introduce the company, to look at the history, to sort of show a lot of visuals of pictures of, how the team got together. And it's really about sort of creating those first very conscious touch points, and then, creating understanding for one another. In our case, the integrations always happened very fast. So very quickly of, completing the deal, we almost immediately started integrating, right? So, it was definitely a big challenge of making sure that everyone always knew what is happening, why is it happening, what's in it for me. So it's as much as you can communicate on that as early as possible, the best outcome you're going to receive.
Absolutely. And then there was the episode with Rebecca Wetterman from Valoir, episode 8. So with her, we talked about employee surveys and that they are a waste of time. And we also talked about how organizations should treat HR and people data.
In your experience, what have most organizations been doing with the data that they gathered from employee surveys so far, Rebecca?
Well, let's face it, Neely. Most surveys stink. They're backward looking, a way to either congratulate ourselves or blame someone for something that happened or the sentiment 6 months ago at our company.
Yes, she was certainly very passionate about employee surveys. Then another amazing one was with Eric Van Vulpen of AIHR, episode 9. He had some great analogies in that episode where he talked about the plane's cockpit and different things. So that was a real standout too.
Going back to the analogy with, of the airplane, your data is essentially, your dashboards with all the different meters and altitude meters. And I'm not a pilot, so I don't know all the elements on an airplane's dashboard. And most of the buttons and the switches and the meters there, you don't really use them. As long as you know your altitude and your direction, and your speed, you're mostly there. But when it hits the fan, you need to know where the buttons are, to solve those issues. And they may be buttons, to extinguish an engine fire, which hopefully you'll never use in your career. But, you need to know where that button is. And I think that's also where how you should look at data. There are a number of KPIs. They will be different for, depending on the company. But there are a number of KPIs that you want to keep an eye out continuously. There are a number of metrics and KPIs that you probably will never look at only when the business needs arrive. So when your engine goes in fire, you want to make sure that that beeping sound and that light that is blinking, that your engine is on fire, that you notice it and that you react on it and take action on it. And I think that's also how organizations should, and especially the HR department should look at metrics and KPIs. They need to define what are the key performance indicators that help us boost business performance, which is a very hard exercise, but a vital exercise to do. That's probably a fairly short list, and they need to put a target on it and try to improve those key performance drivers.
It was, Joe. And then last but certainly not least, because we don't want to do more than 5 now today, was the episode with Raj from Harvard. And he talked about work from anywhere. And he actually has been studying that way before COVID hit us. And that was episode 16.
So the benefit of work from anywhere for individuals is what I call geographic flexibility, that we choose where we want to live. And we can choose based on cost of living. So many of the people I have studied in my studies in the US Patent Office or Tulsa remote, they moved to cheaper cities. And if the company pays you the same salary, that means you have more money in your pocket to buy a bigger house or afford daycare, which would make you more productive.
I think a good sign of whether an episode is really, really good is when if the person says, you could refer to my Harvard Business Review article.
Yep.
That was amazing.
I
always remember that snippet.
Definitely. Now, on to season 2, because season 2 is coming soon. Joe and I will be taking a very short break, but we can already tell you that season 2 will start with a short intro episode published on the 26th of July. So stay tuned.
Yes, and we don't want to ruin anything. We actually want to build a little bit of anticipation, but we're changing things up a little bit for season 2. There's not going to be any guests. It's just going to be me and you, Neely. Here in the studio, to bring you a series of short, practical episodes, really with the view of getting you ready for the return to work after summer. But I'm not going to ruin the surprise right now. All the details will come on July 26th.
Yes. One thing's for sure, though, I think, Joe, whether you're an HR professional who knows their stuff, a manager of a team, or an inquisitive employee interested in the future of work, there'll be a bunch of gold again in season 2 just for you.
Yes, there will. So we'll see you again soon.
See ya.